Trying to decide which is the best video game console of all time can be a bit like trying to pick a favorite child. They each have their own good and bad points and have been responsible for their fair share of both enjoyable and frustrating memories over the years. Some consoles stood out due to their unique features or graphical prowess, while others relied more on their solid catalog of games. Welcome to Game Rant, everyone. I'm Bilal, and here's our ranking of the 10 best video game consoles of all time. Starting things off with the Nintendo Wii. The Nintendo Wii managed to drag gaming out of the bedroom and into the living room with its innovative motion controls appealing to people of all ages and backgrounds. The novelty of motion controls helped to sell 100 million units globally during its lifetime. It was the very definition of pick up and play and offered an excellent selection of fitness-oriented games along with amazing first-party entries. If you didn't wear the Wiimote strap properly though, you might have flung it at your TV. At number 9, we have the Sega Genesis. Competition is important in any industry, and gaming is no exception. Building up upon the success of the Master System, the Genesis gave the Super Nintendo a real run for its money and even managed to outsell it in some territories. A huge part of the console's success can be traced back to an aggressive marketing strategy from Sega of America and a certain blue hedgehog named Sonic. For many, the promise of blast processing and a console that did what Nintendo didn't proved too enticing to turn down and helped Sega to secure a firm foothold in the ever-growing home console market. At number 8, we have the Xbox 360. Microsoft opted to release the 360 a full year before the PS3, which yielded great results. They continued their strategy of pushing console exclusives with the likes of Forza, Gears of War, and Halo helping to sell millions of consoles all around the world. Granted, the 360 does lose points for its infamous Red Ring of Death issue, which was not a fun time for many gamers. Looking at a classic, we have the Nintendo Entertainment System. The Atari 2060 helped to establish the home console market, but it was the NES that saved it following the great video game crash of 1983. The NES, or Famicom in Japan, brought popular arcade characters like Mario and Donkey Kong into people's homes, while also introducing them to other great franchises like The Legend of Zelda, Metroid, and Final Fantasy. Though basic by today's standards, the NES was a pretty impressive piece of hardware back in the 80s. Safe to say, gaming would not be where it is today without the NES. Next up, the original PlayStation. The release of the PlayStation surprised a lot of people, but it was actually a console that was many years in the making. Sony at one point had been working with Nintendo to release a disc-based system known as the Nintendo PlayStation, but ultimately wound up going it alone. The switch from discs to cartridges that the PS1 facilitated gave developers a lot more freedom, which ultimately led to several big franchises jumping ship. Unlike Sega and Nintendo, which each had one main mascot, the PlayStation had several, with Lara Croft, Crash Bandicoot, and Solid Snake being just a few of the popular characters that are best associated with the PS1. The leap from 2D to 3D wasn't a particularly smooth one, but it's a leap that the PS1 pioneered, cementing its place as one of the best video game consoles of all time. Going back to Nintendo, we have the Nintendo Switch. For years, handheld consoles and home consoles were seen as two separate things. But that all changed with the release of the Nintendo Switch. Boasting the power of an admittedly weak home console and the portability of a handheld, the Switch captivated gamers all over the world and as a result, has sold phenomenally today. Sure, the lack of power, the subpar online experience, and Joy-Con drift does hold the system back a little, but given its low price tag and the convenience that the console offers along with a great library, these flaws can be overlooked. At number 4, we have the Dreamcast. It's been said countless times before, but the Dreamcast was a console that was years ahead of its time. Sadly, the Dreamcast was destined to fail from the very beginning, with Sega having lost the trust of both gamers and third-party developers alike with its decision to abandon the Saturn and some of the many Genesis add-ons. The fact that piracy was possible without modifying the console didn't help either, but it was ultimately the release of another console on this list that served as the final nail in the Dreamcast coffin. Taking bronze, we have the Game Boy. Several companies attempted to develop their own portable gaming consoles, but it was Nintendo that finally nailed the formula back in the late 80s. The resulting console and its many successors would go on to dominate the market for decades to come. Over the years, many tried to compete with the system, but none came close. The system laid down the foundations for future Nintendo handhelds, with the GBA, the DS, and even the Switch owing much of their success to the OG Game Boy. At silver, we have the SNES. Many of the best video game consoles introduced innovative new features, but that wasn't really the case with the Super Nintendo. Sure, the SNES was a pretty advanced piece of hardware at the time of its release, but it's difficult to really single out anything that the console did that its competition couldn't emulate. What it did do, however, it did exceedingly well. Make great games. The SNES was 2D at its peak. As a result, the system's library boasts some of the best RPGs ever made alone, while also providing fans with the very finest 2D installments of some of Nintendo's biggest franchises. And looking at the king of consoles, we have the PlayStation 2. For the role that it played in refining 3D video games, its ridiculously large library, and its ability to double up as a DVD player, the PlayStation 2 just about does enough to clinch the top spot. Upon its worldwide release in the year 2000, the PS2 absolutely destroyed the competition, outselling the GameCube by more than 7-1 and forcing Sega out of the home console market entirely on its journey to become the best-selling video game console of all time. And that's our rankings of the best video game consoles of all time. Thanks for watching.